Hey, Dedan, welcome to be on. Thanks for coming on to share your story about the Rose Bowl Foundation.
Thanks for having me, Ben. Really happy to be there. Excited for what you're doing, and appreciate the opportunity to be on today to represent the Rose Bowl.
Absolutely. So for the audience, what I want to do is share a little bit about what Dedan's involved in. So Dedan Brozino is the Chief Development Officer of the Rose Bowl Stadium, and with leadership of its 501c3 Legacy Foundation. Dedan is primarily responsible for developing a strategic long-range fundraising plan for this stadium through the Legacy Foundation. Since his arrival in 2015, the foundation has generated more than $22 million in new gift pledges in support of this national historic landmark. Wow, that's exciting work, and I know I've met with you a few years ago. You were kind enough and gracious enough to invite me to several of the events you put on. I actually had the chance to walk on the field, an amazing historical place. So Dedan, with all this success you're enjoying right now and the big impact work you're doing with the Rose Bowl, take us back to where it all started for you.
First and foremost, the grass you walked on is real. It's not fake. That's one of the number one questions we get. It is real grass, and we have an incredible field maintenance crew led by Will Schnell. So I'm glad you were able to stick your feet on the grass. I'm a small town kid. I was raised in Eastern Pennsylvania in a small town, 4,000, 5,000 people. And, I think that's really where a lot of my relationship-driven roots came from. In a small town like that, small graduating class, you're playing sports, you're involved with so much, and you see a lot of the same people, your friends, their parents, their relatives. You see a lot of them frequently, and it almost forces you and requires you into having positive, sociable relationships. And, I love relationships in my current role at the Rose Bowl as Chief Development Officer, and it's a reason I'm addicted to my work is because of the relationships you get to have with people and figuring out why everybody's different, how they're similar. And I owe it to that upbringing I had in that small town. I left the small town. Lehighton was the name of the town. It's in the Pocono region of Eastern Pennsylvania, the coal region, steel country on the East Coast. Steel country just wasn't in Western Pennsylvania. So I had relatives that worked at Bethlehem Steel, and there's a grittiness to that region of the state. And I think, between the relationship-driven mindset that you're forced to have in a small town like that and the grittiness that's associated with the blue-collar jobs that are around that area, you really take it with you. And so I was fortunate enough, I got into DeSales University, which is in Center Valley, Pennsylvania. And in my 4 years there, I got to play collegiate baseball. We went to the College World Series my first year there. And then an injury took me down. So, you're left with 3 years where you're expecting to play a collegiate sport. What do you do? And I was fortunate enough. I went into the athletic department at DeSales, and DeSales is a Division III school, NCAA. And at Division III schools, it's a smaller staff, and the staffs wear multiple hats. So it was really an awesome wake-up call for me and an experience over my final 3 years at the university to get access to that type of grind in a department like that. So there was a gentleman out there, the sports information director, BJ Spiegelmeyer, who took me under his wing. BJ, thank you for giving me my start. And he really exposed me to the sports industry, made me want to write better, made me want to write more. I had a journalism professor, AJ Moore, that really would tear up and rip apart my writing at the time and made me a better writer, which I still carry with me today, which I think as a society is kind of a lost art form, is journalism and writing and
right.
the appropriate way to communicate. So I left DeSales. I dated my wife for several years while I was there, and she was a Southern California kid, born and raised out here, and we wanted to move back. So we packed up the Jeep. We drove cross country, which was an awesome experience. If you ever get the chance, I'll never do it again, but it was awesome the one time. And got out here, and I joined the graduate program for sport management at Long Beach State to get my master's degree. 18-month program, and it exposed me to everything in LA. And I think when I got to LA, it was a bit of a culture shock for me, going from a small 4,000 or 5,000 person town to this metropolis of that's really a hub, a media hub, an entertainment hub, a hub of America, with a handful of other cities. It was a shock, but I look back to the qualities and the values that I learned in Lehighton in terms of being relationship driven, being genuine, being hard worker and gritty. That translates wherever you go. And I was fortunate enough to have some good mentors along the way from my grandfather and my father, my father-in-law, my brother-in-law. I mean, I'm thankful to be surrounded by a lot of people that just work hard. And, for me, that just instilled that foundational element of hard work and being kind on a much deeper level for me. So took away the sticker shock. I still get hit with the sunshine tax, which is
Right.
Its own type of sticker shock. But,
Right.
it got rid of that initial shock, and I got into the sports business out here because of that graduate program at Long Beach State. And thankfully, what that did is it gave me an opportunity to get into Division I collegiate athletics.
Right.
I had a goal of being an athletic director. I worked for free for a couple of years, got involved with the marketing department there. Tim Dixon, who's currently at the University of the Pacific, gave me a chance. Thank you, Tim. Gave me my real second chance here in first chance in California, second chance in my career. And he taught me marketing. I didn't know what marketing was, but he thought I'd be good at it because of being relationship driven, being creative, being gritty, and it kind of stuck with me. So I stayed at Long Beach State for nearly a decade, rose up to number 2 in the department, where I oversaw everything from fundraising to marketing to our revenue initiatives. And it was those last 5 or 6 years at Long Beach State where fundraising and development really struck me. And that's where I think I found my calling and hit my stride, because development and fundraising is not rocket science. It's certainly incredibly important with nonprofits around the world.
Mm-hmm.
But to be a successful fundraiser, in my opinion, you have to, number one, believe in the cause, and you have to be driven by relationships, because people give to people. They don't necessarily give to a cause.
Right.
And if you can be genuine about your relationships and about your belief in whatever it is you work with, people are going to follow that, and they're going to ask how they can help. And thankfully, I had some success at Long Beach, and then the Rose Bowl came calling. And our CEO, Daryl Dunn, has been there for 20 plus years. He's a top leader in Los Angeles and around the country. And thankfully, he's entrusted me and our Legacy Foundation staff to really build the philanthropy profile of a nonprofit at the Rose Bowl Stadium, which is incredibly unique. And I've been here almost 5 years now. It's been a fun ride. It's been a true ride. And I think what I love most about the Rose Bowl Stadium is it's a small staff. People don't realize the Rose Bowl only has about 35 full-time employees. We're a small city that probably rivals the population of my hometown from my childhood on an event day. But there's really 35 people that just grind and are pulling in the same direction, and each have a position of their own importance. I mean, it's great that myself and my team of Brian Brantley, Danny Perry, Ashley Rodriguez, Lauren Hall, it's great that we've been able to raise the funds that we have philanthropically in such a unique way. But I also think that, we can't raise the funds that we have if our architect's not doing what she needs to be doing, or our operations team and our COO isn't doing what they're doing, or our revenue team isn't doing what they're doing. And, it's a top-down, trickle-down effect that starts with our CEO that empowers every department to do what they're doing at the Rose Bowl to make it special. Mm-hmm. But I also think, Ben, that, the Rose Bowl brand, it's got such a special tone with people. Over 100 million people have come through our gate since 1922, and the tone that the Rose Bowl Stadium brand has and the positivity that it has globally, I think is really what makes our staff work the way that we work, because we care about nothing but the future of the Rose Bowl, regardless of the department we're in. And I'm thankful to have found myself, plopped right in the lap of this beautiful venue that you see virtually behind me, but also to work with those 35 full-time employees plus that daily work to protect this place in the different ways that each of our department does. So it's been a fun ride, and I'm excited to get to where I'm at and continue the progression.
Yeah, I just reflect that it's amazing the impact of 35 souls and the ripple effect it's having on millions of people across the globe. I'm sure it's not lost to you guys when you come in there every day, but 35 people are certainly transforming the landscape for a lot of people in terms of entertainment, enjoyment, connections, relationships, memories, sort of like making memories, right? So hats off to you and the team there, and for a phenomenal job you guys are doing with the Rose Bowl Foundation. What's it like, teaching these students who are interested in sports marketing management? What's that experience been like for you?
It's been humbling. I absolutely love the experience. I had the benefit and the honor of going through the Long Beach State Sport Management Program myself when I first moved out here. And honestly, it gave me my start. It gave me the confidence to start in California. It gave me the confidence to transition the skill set that I brought from my childhood in Pennsylvania that you and I just chatted about. But, the sport management as an industry has changed over the years. 10, 15 years ago, there weren't as many sport management degree programs. There weren't as many options for students wanting to get into the business and carry a degree affiliated with such. And I think it changed maybe around 2008, 2009, 2010, where a lot of these programs started popping up. And, you know, unofficially, my personal opinion is I think a lot of these programs popped up for the wrong reasons. They popped up as cash cows for universities and opportunities to take advantage and be advantageous of students and potential graduates that wanted to be in an industry that maybe they didn't know a whole lot about. Right. And I feel very confident saying that the Long Beach State program is the exact opposite of that, where it truly is invested in the students and getting them that start in the industry, whether that's in the LA market or beyond. And, you know, the LA market is one of the best networking opportunities in the country, next to probably New York. It's one of the largest media markets. And just having sat in that student chair and gone through that program myself, I felt that it was, if I ever had the opportunity to pay it forward and give it back to future graduates of that program, I wanted to do that. And thankfully, I've been doing that for about 7-8 years now. And, you know, there's not enough jobs out there in sports business, sport management to satisfy the degree candidates that are out there. Unfortunately, it's because of that influx in programs that universities have adopted. And so, I mean, it's really important that we talk to these students and understand, you know, it's not the highest paying business. It's not the most lucrative. In my opinion, it's one of the most rewarding because of what you get to influence and be affiliated with. But for us with the Long Beach State program, being able to dynamically pivot and dynamically change to communicate with the students on a level of, we're not just teaching them about sports law or sports marketing, we're teaching them about their personal brands and how to learn about their personal brands and own it and be selfish at times in their career. We're teaching them about foundational elements of leadership and life. And, you know, those are transitional regardless if you're a real estate agent, a podcast host, a sport management or professional, or a neurosurgeon, you know. And we've shifted our focus a lot over the last several years to those foundational elements that are really key to being successful in anything. And then when you sprinkle the sport management curriculum on top that Long Beach State has developed, it's been a really special thing to be a part of, and I'm humbled to continue that.
Right. You mentioned earlier in 2015, you took over the role as Chief Development Officer and member of the executive leadership team for the Rose Bowl Stadium. Obviously, this is a very unique role. What is the main objective of this role, and what are you trying to accomplish for the Rose Bowl Stadium in particular?
Yeah. So a lot of people, you know, they look at the Rose Bowl Stadium and they think, you know, nearly 100,000 seats. They're bringing in the Rolling Stones. They're bringing in Taylor Swift, Coldplay, the Rose Bowl game, UCLA football. There's a ton of cash flowing through that place. It's a cash register, and that's not incorrect. But what I think the general public doesn't understand is the stadium is 98 years young. You know, we turn 100 years young in 2 years, and we're possibly more vibrant than we've ever been before in our lifetime. You know, we're getting ready to host our third Olympic game in 2028. We're on the table for our third World Cup in 2026. There's no other stadium venue in the world that can lay claim to 2 World Cup finals and 2 Olympics right now. And we're about to have our third of each potentially. And I think, you know, understanding the cash flow and how budgetarily those major events like the Rolling Stones and the Rose Bowl game, they go to help pay the guts of the facility, the preventative maintenance, the past renovation debt that we have. You know, there's a debt service that we operate upon annually that pays for the beauty that we all enjoy. You know, the Rose Bowl being 98 years old, it needs to be updated every year, every day. So a lot of the revenues that we capture from past events help pay for those renovations and those capital projects of past years gone by. What I do and what my role with the Rose Bowl Legacy Foundation is, we're a 501c3. We're very unique. We have a mission of enhancing, preserving, protecting the future of the historic landmark. We're one of 4 historic landmark stadiums in the country. And our duty is to raise above and beyond philanthropic support to put immediately right back into the venue, either through educational programming, capital improvements, or heritage protection. So over the years, we've done everything from raise money to put up new light standards that I tweeted out this morning. We finished putting the new light poles on the pavilion at the stadium. So we're going to have new state-of-the-art lighting capacity at the venue. There's a second video board that's going up next year. Heard it here first. That will enhance the fan experience and the patron experience. And that was all raised through our foundation donors and philanthropists. So for us, it's important that we leverage the Rose Bowl's brand to generate philanthropy in a very unique way, but also put that back into the venue and either do capital projects, like I said, or maybe it's an educational project around the venue where we're hosting 300 young women and talking about inclusion and women's empowerment through sport in the '99 Women's World Cup title game with Brandi Chastain, or maybe it's putting up a statue in honor of Jackie Robinson to recognize his heritage and his records that he holds at the stadium from Pasadena. So it's been really nice, and I think the money we've been able to generate over the past several years, I've been here about 5 years now, and thankfully with the team I work with, Brian Brantley, Danny Perry, Ashley Rodriguez, Lauren Hall, and then our CEO, Daryl Dunn, who has been there 20 plus years. He's one of the best leaders in the country. We've worked and activated as a team to generate a lot of money over the last 5 years alone. And since the foundation's been around since 2010, we've generated about $36 million in gross giving that has helped a lot of these things. Because like we talked about at the early part of the program, your first question, the Rose Bowl it stands for much more than just a stadium that can host events and mega concerts. It's the largest stadium in LA still to this day, still has hosted the largest Super Bowl ever. But it stands for more than that. I mean, there's generational memories at stake, and it's up to us and through us, the giving that we procure in the foundation to charitably give back to the venue and make sure that the next 25, 50, 100 years are solidified. And it's not easy, Ben.
Right.
We're talking about a time where a lot of nonprofit organizations are focused on hunger and healthcare and education and just supporting society to keep it going. And those are incredibly, incredibly important. We've actually pivoted our mission to support some of those as well. But in a normal day, in the pre-coronavirus days, it wasn't an easy charity to run. It wasn't an easy cause for us to go get donations for. And we found a way. And I think we found a way because of the emotion attached to the Rose Bowl, the memories attached to the Rose Bowl. And that's very special for people around the world. And it's up to us to tell their story and use their influence to make the stadium better for the next generation.
Yeah, and hopefully after COVID-19, this will come streaming back. But let me go back to just to share with the audience sort of the historical, the setting for the Rose Bowl. It was opened in 1922, and as you mentioned, it's a National Historic Landmark, one of four. And I read, I think you mentioned it seats 100,000 people. When I was there, it felt very personal. As we get close to the field and everybody's sort of close to each other and in proximity to where the game is actually played, it felt very, very personal. But the Rose Bowl is played there obviously every year. We've had 5 Super Bowls, as I read there, the largest one you mentioned in history. We had, I believe, the 1984 gold medal match, 1994 World Cup, and of course, Brandi Chastain, 1999 Women's World Cup, and that was the iconic where she slid in, took off her top, and that was a picture for the ages. I mean, we're talking about a very special stadium with a lot of emotions, a lot of memories. I remember USC and Texas game being played there. USC was kind of the prohibitive favorite, as I recall. And then Vince Young came in and just orchestrated that amazing comeback in the fourth quarter. So this is the definition of historical. And as I mentioned before, hey, no pressure. But what does it mean to you be part of this Rose Bowl leadership team and carry on the legacy and tradition of excellence?
It's an honor. It truly is an honor. We have the best team. I've been fortunate in my young career to work with several teams at Long Beach State, at DeSales, prior to Long Beach State, now at the Rose Bowl. And I can honestly say this is one of the most unselfish, genuine teams to work with. And I think that's really, number one, because of our leadership from our CEO, Daryl Dunn. But I also think it's because of the brand and the power and the special nature of the brand. With the list that you just ran down, Ben, I mean, those are transformational moments in sports and entertainment that have really had staying power. I mean, specifically the 1999 Team USA Women's World Cup Championship with Brandi Chastain. That was a watershed moment for women's athletics in this country. That if you look at rankings on the internet and the 20th anniversary of that match was last July. We dedicated a statue to it on our grounds, actually. But on that 20th anniversary, there was a lot of talk about that. And some people actually rank that moment in terms of power and importance for women's athletics above Title IX. And that's saying a lot. Yeah. And the Rose Bowl continues to stand for these important days and important moments. It's really funky. I mean, I've been there it's almost like a spell is over the Rose Bowl, where, you know, the sports entertainment gods are always taking care of us, because it seems like it's just incredibly magnetic for these moments. I mean, you mentioned USC Texas, and that was rebroadcast by ESPN a couple of weeks ago, and it was awesome to see that game, which a lot of people think was the best college football game in the history of the game. But when you look at some of but some of the New Year's Day games we've had in past years, I mean, it seems like they're always coming down to the wire. The concerts seem larger than life. The soccer matches seem larger than life. I remember my first year there, it was October 2015, and we hosted a soccer match between USA and Mexico, and it was the Gold Cup final for CONCACAF. Mm-hmm. And you know, there's World Cup implications on the line and things for the coming years. And, you know, the USA had been rebuilding their national team, and I mean, the place was shaking, and it was filled to the brim. You got 90,000 plus people. You know, the game almost went to penalty kicks. It went to extra time, and almost went to kicks. These are like pinch me moments where these iconic sporting events that look great on paper turn out to be even better once they're played in the iconic bowl. Right. Even from a performance standpoint, you know, we've seen it from Kenny Chesney, and Coldplay has done their DVD there. U2 came back and did their Joshua Tree tour 30 years later. But I think what really struck me with these performers calling the Rose Bowl a bucket list is actually when you hear them say it. And it was the Taylor Swift show back in 2017, and Taylor came out. She came out on fire and sang one or two songs, and then she came out to the edge of the stage, and there was a moment of silence that was dictated by her, and she just kind of bowed her head, and, you know, it was very chapel-like almost. You know, she wasn't praying or anything, but she picked her head up and she said, you know, I get it now. This is my first time here ever in the stadium. I get it now. This place is truly special. And it was almost like she sang those two songs. She came out on fire, and then she caught herself and she said, holy cow, I'm in the Rose Bowl. This is ridiculous. And to hear performers like that have played around the world at virtually any venue that they call their shot on, say that with such genuine emotion, that's what I think drives our staff at the Rose Bowl and what makes it so special to work there, because it's really hard to describe the brand and the emotion underlying on that brand that we're all here to protect.
Right. And the idea that a performer would say it's a bucket list, that's certainly saying something. And you mentioned earlier, you know, in this time of COVID and some of the other national priorities of healthcare, homelessness, you know, poverty, you really have a tall order to raise money for the Rose Bowl Foundation, right? So I guess the next question would be, why does the stadium need funding or fundraising to secure its future? Because I think there's a perception that, look, as you mentioned earlier, this is a cash cow. You got all these performers, all these events, and certainly some dollars are earmarked for the stadium. But what you're doing is quite different. Can you just explain for the audience the need to protect the future of the stadium through your efforts and how it differs from typical events and the monies that's flowing from those events?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think with the sensitivities to COVID-19, it's allowed us to hit timeout and really kind of recheck our playbook and what do we need to do to be on the offensive moving forward. Our board of directors actually voted to pivot our mission in the interim, where we traditionally have always raised funds to support the future and enhance the Rose Bowl Stadium as a venue. They voted to pivot our mission during this time and help our community. So we've actually raised money to support over 8,000 lunches for local school students in Pasadena that can't eat on the weekends because the local district is only feeding them during the week with the meal program. And so, you know, and I think that was an easy pivot for our board to make and for our staff to make, because the Rose Bowl wouldn't be what it is without community and without the fans and without the people. And, you know, when you talk about over 100 million people coming through our gates over the years since we opened in 1922, that's a pretty powerful statement and pretty hard to ignore when your community needs help. And we're a bit of a beacon of light for that community. So we pivoted not just to – go ahead, Ben.
No, I was going to say, I'd also argue that I met you a few years ago, and you talked about ongoing programs with youth at risk, right? Bringing them to the Rose Bowl, having a day there on the field, letting them experience that, inspiring these kids. So what I've experienced with the Rose Bowl Foundation, it's not just in times of crisis. You guys are certainly stepping up, but this is your modus operandi. I mean, this is in your nature to always help the community, always connect with kids. and use that platform to really inspire and motivate.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's about our campus. We refer to the Rose Bowl as a campus often, and like right now we're using our parking lot as a testing site for COVID-19. We're hosting trailers for FEMA to take care of first responders that might be exposed. And I mean, but the program you're referencing, I mean, we raise money for everything, and the program you're referencing, we call it our Field Trip to the Field program. We got a generous donation from the American Honda Corporation a few years ago, and it essentially pays for every 7th grade public school student in Pasadena to get an annual field trip to the Rose Bowl, get a healthy lunch, hear a motivational speaker, do a PE activity on the field, which is typically something like capture the flag with the fire department or the police department, and then get an educational tour and get home. Because when you think about it, I mean, Pasadena and LA, I mean, there's so many iconic things here that people don't get to see. I mean, I've lived here for almost 14 years, and I've yet to be to the Hollywood Bowl. Like that's egregious. I need to fix that. But when you look at some of the lower moderate income families and students and populations, tickets are expensive. They might not ever get to go to the Rose Bowl. So for them to have a day to themselves and be at the Rose Bowl and experience it really in a different light than any other group has experienced it, that's truly, truly special. And what that program is going to do is we're going into year 5 of that now. It's eventually going to ensure that every public school student in Pasadena has been to the Rose Bowl and had this experience. And I think when you ask about our message and what the foundation is about, primarily we're about fundraising for capital improvements. Again, we're 98 years young stadium. We have leaky pipes, we have gas lines, we have roofing issues. It's a 98-year-old house, but we're also a historical landmark, so we have a duty to protect that house for the general public's enjoyment. And when you talk about that, but also sprinkle in Los Angeles right now is probably one of the hottest, most popular, competitive sports entertainment markets in the country, with SoFi Stadium coming online, the Coliseum just underwent a renovation, the LAFC Stadium, the Forum. I mean, there's just all these options at work, and we want to remain relevant like we have. We're only allowed to have 15 events a year, major events, because of the community that we live in. So that's a very unique place. So what the foundation's trying to do is how can we go out and raise money to continue capital improvement projects like the new lights or like the new video board that we talked about? Or how can we go raise money for educational projects like the Jackie Robinson statue or the Brandy Chastain statue, where people can come every day and be educated and feel included in that history? And then really that third bucket for us is literal educational programming with the kids, and how can we leverage the Rose Bowl brand and those incredible events that we have had and draw out the sportsmanship, draw out the teamwork, draw out the inclusion and the ethics that are inherent in those events, and teach them, the kids, through exposing them to the Rose Bowl almost like a classroom. And it's not released yet, but we're working on the launch of a larger platform, which we'll call the Rose Bowl Institute, that we're really excited about, because the guts of the Rose Bowl Institute is really taking those inherent qualities and characteristics of the major events we've hosted and giving them back to community and students in the form of educational programming at the bowl, like we're doing with this field trip program. So, I think you can't buy history, you can't build history. You build history over time. You don't build it with a bulldozer and a crane. And I think that's one thing that we have going for us that's always allowed us to resonate with donors, resonate with potential supporters, resonate with premium seat holders and sponsors and community supporters of many different walks of life. And we just want to get out and tell the story locally, regionally, and nationally, because we know people have been impacted by the Rose Bowl everywhere. And when people are impacted, they lean in and they ask us how they can help. And that's where we can activate a lot of our projects through philanthropy. And frankly, a lot of people are shocked that we have a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And when they hear that and they learn why, they're really excited for that, because they want to see it protected for the next generation, whether they're here or not. And that's a tremendous thing for us to be able to steward and protect, is the future of the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, that's cool. It reminds me of that iconic line with Russell Crowe, and I think it was Spartacus, what we do in this life goes into eternity. And certainly what you're doing and touching the lives of kids that are maybe disadvantaged in that area is something you'll never forget in your entire life. So I think I would characterize your job as a job that most people would dream of having. I mean, as you sit in your office, I remember we had a conversation one time, you can hear practice sessions of leading artists in the world, such as Rolling Stones, Justin Bieber, Adele was there doing a sound check, U2, Journey, Guns N' Roses, Beyonce, Eminem, Metallica, just to name a few. What is a story that you can share with the audience of a band or an artist you heard practicing from your office?
You know, BTS is one. BTS is arguably one of the hottest bands in the country. We were lucky enough to have them for multiple nights last year. We were due to have them again in a few weeks in early May until the coronavirus closures happen. So we're hopeful that we'll reschedule that tour. They were one that, you know, and they're a Korean pop band, and they're very upbeat. They're very choreographed. That was a really fun one to walk down upon. But you know, I think above and beyond the sound checks, it's the relationships that we've been able to develop and the people you bump into during these sound checks and during these rehearsals. We do a lot of filmings. So somebody that's become a friend and a friend of the Rose Bowl is Joe Latrulio from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, a show on Fox right now. Great comedy. I highly recommend it to anybody that hasn't checked it out. It's a good laugh, especially during our times. But Joe was down there shooting a spot for Funny or Die with Rich Eisen. And because of that spot, we met Rich Eisen, we met Joe, and they've been tremendous people and contacts for the Rose Bowl. So not even necessarily a sound check where you're getting a free concert on a Friday before an actual Saturday concert, but you know, they both had stories about the Rose Bowl. Rich Eisen in particular, Rich was a senior at the University of Michigan and was covering, as a sports editor in the student newspaper in Michigan, was covering Bo Schembechler's last game as head coach at Michigan, which was the 1990 Rose Bowl game, 1989-1990 Rose Bowl game. And I had no idea. Then you start talking to Rich about that. Another story is, it was actually my first day on the job, second day on the job, July 25th, 2015, we were hosting our first country concert ever in the stadium's history. It still to this day is our only country concert. It was headlined by Kenny Chesney, Jason Aldean, but we had heard through the grapevine that Kenny was a mega college football fan. He's from Tennessee, mega college football fan. And we heard that, and we had gotten close to the late, great broadcaster Keith Jackson at the time. Mm-hmm. And we heard it, and we said, Keith, why don't you come out? We'll see if we can get you to meet Kenny before the show and just surprise him. And coincidentally, the foundation, we were trying to name our broadcast center after Keith Jackson at the time, and we were looking for donors and things, and Keith was engaged with it, as was his beautiful wife, Turi Ann. And we brought Keith out. Kenny was doing his pre-concert green room meet and greets that he does, and every performer does. And the last person that we walked around the corner was Keith Jackson. And Keith's pretty physically imposing. He's 6'5", big guy. Kenny's a smaller guy. It was like a little kid seeing Santa Claus for the first time. I mean, there was 30 hugs, photographs, embarrassment, excitement. It was a lot of fun. And it was about 3 hours before the show. And again, it's my second day on the job, mind you. And Kenny says, what are you all doing right now? You want to come to my trailer? I got 3 hours until the show. So you're not going to say no to that. So we invited Keith Jackson and our CEO, myself, and a few others onto his RV, his tour bus. And we literally sat in there, and it was Kenny, his dad, Keith Jackson, a few others. I didn't say a word for the 2 hours we were on that tour bus, but Kenny and Keith, just to hear them swap stories and hear how Keith bound Kenny and his father together through sports because of his voice over the years. And you know, that's one common denominator that Kenny and his father still have is sports because of Keith Jackson. And it was so humbling to hear that, you know, that the Rose Bowl and a guy like Keith Jackson had such impact on a guy like Kenny Chesney, who's just a mega star.
Right.
And so somebody brings Kenny his cowboy hat, which that I guess signifies that it's time to go. It's ready to go. So he gives him his cowboy hat. And before Kenny goes, he says, hey, Keith, I got some buddies outside. Before you go, can we take a photograph together? And so Kenny steps out, whistles, all of his buddies come around, and it's Ashton Kutcher, Mila Kunis, Vince Vaughn, and every one of them, we were able to have sidebar conversations. What's that?
You think you're living in a movie right now.
Oh, gosh darn. It's like I was ready to quit right there. I mean, what day could get better than that? It's my second day on the job, and this is what I'm exposed to. And And but every one of them, we had a few sidebar conversations with them before we all walked in to the venue, and everybody had a story about it, from Vince Vaughn to Ashton to Mila, and they enjoyed meeting Keith. But down the road, Kenny actually ended up becoming a major contributor to the Rose Bowl Legacy Foundation, and actually made the lead donation to that Keith Jackson Broadcast Center campaign. So his name is up at the Rose Bowl. He's a donor, and he's a great friend. But it's because of those memories and those emotions that you and I have been talking about on the call today. Is, it's different for everybody. No one story is the same. I mean, for Kenny, it was about him bringing him closer to his dad, and that happened through Keith's voice and New Year's Day at the Rose Bowl. Because back then they didn't show every college football game like you and I have the privilege of seeing today. It was about the game of the week or the bowl games. There was only a handful of bowl games back then, and that's what I'm talking about. The Rose Bowl bridges these generational gaps and pulls everyone along, which sports and entertainment naturally does, but it's like this magic dust that is sprinkled on top of it when you add the Rose Bowl brand to it. And that was a special day for me selfishly, personally, but I think it was a real eye-opener and gave me a ton of perspective on what I was getting into at the time. Because if the Rose Bowl is making these mega celebrities act childlike in their resurrection of these stories, it's no different than you and I talking about it, or a mega philanthropist in New York City or the Bay Area or Los Angeles talking about it. The Rose Bowl makes you a kid again, because it takes you back to a time that was positive. Those 3-4 hours you spend with us are always memorable, and those become foundational talking points for relationships. And I think that's why you see a lot of the vernacular and the conversation in society and through our government leaders right now about when can we bring sports back. When, it's about reopening businesses and getting these small businesses going and getting the unemployment rate down and getting people back to work. But if you look back at 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, and it always seems like sports is the spark that brings society back to a certain level of trust and excitement, where it has the confidence in itself again. And I think that's what we've been able to do over the years, and we're excited to get ourselves back open whenever we're able to.
Yeah, it was funny. I was listening to Robin Roberts on, I think it was Good Morning America. She interviewed Michael Jordan. And of course, they're airing The Last Dance on ESPN this Sunday, 10-part series. And they were talking about how sports has really been a unifying element through national tragedies and tough times. And this COVID virus is an interesting one. So it leads me to the next question. We are living in historical times. I think we've had a 75-year lull since World War II, where the nation's been directly this challenged. And usually pandemics are what you read about in other places, and other countries are dealing with it. And yet we're in our little bubble here just enjoying life. But that was rocked, obviously, a few weeks ago. But it's had a huger impact, I would argue, on the professional sports, and certainly concerts and gatherings, and all those businesses that really rely on people showing up in mass to get entertained. So every stadium and venue has been directly impacted by COVID-19. Does the Rose Bowl have a short and a long-term plan to return the fans to the stands?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Obviously we're under the directives of the nation and the state and the county and our local governmental leaders. So we're keeping a close eye on that and have positive relationships with all of them. So we're getting really strong information back. We haven't been given a date yet, but we've been given things to think about that we need to really tackle, no pun intended, to bring it back. And we're keeping a close eye on the college football season. Is that going to start on schedule? Is it going to be pushed? If it's pushed, when does it get pushed to, and how does that impact our major event season, like concerts and soccer that is typically held in our spring and summer months? But the short and long-term plan for the Rose Bowl, we've been really fortunate because we have good relationships across town. There's the LA stadiums and sports organizations have really banded together to share ideas, talk about ideas in a pseudo task force type form, to really talk about the big things. And then on an organizational standpoint, the Rose Bowl Stadium has also formed its own internal task force to tackle these things, because we're unique in our own right. We're municipally owned. We're owned by the city of Pasadena. We're not owned by a billionaire owner that really might be easier to make a decision upon. But there's things that I think society needs to consider that we're starting to think about, and you really don't realize that there could be an issue until we're in a time like we're in. But how is cash handled? How do you get your ketchup and mustard for your hot dog at the concession stand? What's the expectation when entering a venue? When we have 90,000 people, are people going to want to stand front to back in line waiting to get through security like they typically do, which was no big deal? Are you going to want to take things out of your pocket and put it in a plastic container to go through a metal detector? Are we scanning for temperatures? There's a lot of different angles. Buffet lines, our buffet line is going to be acceptable. And so, we're trying to gauge it. Number one, when can things come back? And when it comes back, us as an organization, along with our counterparts along the Southland, can we be prepared to tackle some of these issues, from the cleanliness to just being aware of how the new normal we live in the post-coronavirus world could be impacted? Because it's possible that not all fans come out like they did in the past, or it's possible that they come out wearing masks and they're just excited to see a sporting event again. And so it's been a really interesting few weeks, Ben, because we really, I think, through our counterparts in LA, and then also with the internal team that I've talked about on the call a couple times today, we have some great minds involved that are really trying to think about the corners and what's around that next corner and what can we expect. And I think we need to be prepared for that short term versus long term. Is this new normal going to be the expectation that is still implemented 10 years from now, where you're not sharing a ketchup and mustard stand with somebody else that just bought a hot dog in front of you, and there's cash handling differences and things? Is that going to sustain itself as a new societal norm? Or is it a short-term solution while vaccines are developed and while different safety measures are developed, and then we can kind of ease back into the typical norm of a sporting event, which is, packing yourself into a mega venue around the country, around the world, shoulder to shoulder, and cheering for your favorite team while wearing their colors. And I think that's the hope we think and hope we can all get back to, is the regular normal. But we also want to prepare ourselves that the new short-term challenges could become long-term. And I think through leaning on one another, we talked a lot about relationships early in the meeting today, and leaning on those relationships that we've forged over the years, and allowing them to lean back on the Rose Bowl. It's really what's going to pull us through. And you see it all over society nowadays, from people appreciating the healthcare workers to people supporting local government, doing things to get people back to work and support local restaurants so they don't go under. This has been a really trying time for society, but I think it's really shown the guts of America, and that we truly care about each other, and that we're compassionate. And if anything, it's taught us more patience, and that we can use each other to evaluate scenarios and become stronger. And I think that's what we're doing at the Rose Bowl, to evaluate the situation we're in with the pandemic.
Yeah, and maybe it also as a nation gives us some pause to figure out what really matters in life. And going back to COVID and how to get people confident going back to a stadium, we have social separation of 6 feet. Now we're talking about sitting side by side at a stadium. It seems to me that testing would be first and foremost a short-term solution, where going in that the person you're sitting next to is negative, as long as it's not a false positive, or the sensitivity specificity is at a level where the tests are accurate. I think that's going to be really important. But I think for the casual fan or the concert goer, they need to know that in that environment, they're protected, they're safe, and that the people they're with don't have it until there's a vaccine in place. Because until there's a vaccine or some way to treat it, I think there's always going to be people with some concerns about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're not apples to apples by any means, but it's really no different than the items we've been dealing with from a Homeland Security standpoint since 9/11. We have a great Chief Operating Officer, George Cunningham, that he and his team from an operational standpoint at the venue they're constantly thinking about what's next and what can we do better from a fan protection standpoint, just in terms of counterterrorism and making sure people have a good time and they feel safe when they get in our gates. So, this is along those lines too. Is that, how do we make people feel safe, and that things are clean probably more than they should be, and just making them feel at home. So it just becomes a subliminal thought and not an active thought when they're at our venue, or whether or not they want to buy a ticket to come. Right. And the faster we can do that, and the more actively we can at least show that we're thinking about it, I think that bodes well too. Because a lot of times, if people know you're actively thinking and trying to make something actionable out of a thought, that's enough for them, and they know that you're trying to make things better, and it's never going to be perfect. But we want to strive to achieve that new normal and be prepared to do so, regardless of what level of severity that is for sports and entertainment venues around the country and around the state. And I think with our team's mindset and how they've always approached live events at the Rose Bowl, we're going to be in position A when it comes to doing that.
Right. Let me switch gears here, away from the Rose Bowl, and kind of go back to you as a person. Who's been the most influential person in your life?
I think the most influential person in my life has been two people, my wife and my grandfather. I talked briefly about my wife early on, and how she's the north of my compass, and how she really guides our family and helps our family. And I think the reason our children and us as a couple have such strong core values is because of the symbiotic strength that her and I supplement one another with. And she's really been a pillar in my life for many reasons for the past 18 years plus. And the second one is my grandfather. My grandfather passed when I was in college. I was a sophomore in college. He was a military guy, but he's the one that worked at Bethlehem Steel. And he was about saving money. He was about doing things for the right, positive, true reasons. He was about hard work. And I think I got a lot of my grittiness from him, which was, of course, passed down to my father and passed down to me. And so I think, really looking at my wife, looking at my grandfather, how that impacted my dad, how my dad influenced me. It's really those two or three people that have stuck with me. And I think, we live out here in California. We love it out here. My family's still back east. My wife's family's still back east. And, thank God technology has allowed us to connect and stay connected, especially during this time that we're all experiencing now. But, they really helped us establish ourselves out here and get ourselves going. And I think that the core values that they lent to me that thankfully have stuck with me have pulled us through as a family, and my wife and I have adopted and are now supporting each other with those same values.
That's fantastic. What would you say the most important lesson you've learned in life to this point?
It's a lesson that I'm learning right now over again, like we all are, and that's patience. I think in today's world, a supporter of ours said to me one time, he used to own a big oil company, and he sold it for a lot of money, and he's a great person. He's in his 80s now. But I was running around at a football game, and he stopped me. He said, "I don't know how you guys do it." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "You guys, you're always working. You never have time to settle down and take a break and take time off in terms of evaluating things." And he said, when I was working, through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, he said, if there was an issue at work, I would go home and I'd have dinner with my family. I'd get myself back to neutral, and I would think about it. I'd consider a potential solution to that problem. And then I would come back to work the next day. And even if I didn't have a solution, at least I had given myself time to process it, think about it. So there's such an immediacy because of the devices we all have in our hands and in front of us all the time, and the screen time we all get, that societally it's almost expected that you're always connected. And I think even though we're connected more than ever because of technology during this pandemic and working from home, this pandemic has taught us the age-old adage of patience, and it's almost reteaching us patience and how that's important and critical in our successes, both personally and professionally. I found time. I've never made time before to work out and exercise as much as I should have, and now I found time to do that. And now it's up to me to maintain that when I have to go back to the office and things. And
Right.
It's the little things, Ben, that I think we take for granted. And this time has taught us patience. It's taught us to rely on technology, but not be reliant on technology. And I'm excited to continue that and hopefully transition it over back to normal life when we all get to go back to the office.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Is there anything we haven't covered you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I followed your show. I'd love to just ask the audience, keep clicking, keep following Ben. He's putting out great content, great material. It's helped me. It's helped me learn. I think we can all learn. Don't have an ego that's too big to not want to learn and hear other people's opinions and thoughts, whether you're Republican, Democrat, independent, atheist, religious, whatever it is. I mean, we all have our own boundaries. I get it. But, I think it's important to learn and read and listen and sink in, take stuff in that can be beneficial to us. I mean, we can all learn something from everybody, and the more we can know a little bit about a lot of stuff, the better society will be. So that's the only thing I want to share in closing, Ben, and thank you for your hard work and the content you're putting out to make us all better.
No, thank you. I appreciate those comments in closing. And for the audience listening, how can they learn more about you and support the Rose Bowl Foundation?
Yeah, the Rose Bowl Legacy Foundation and the Rose Bowl Stadium are online. The Rose Bowl Stadium website is rosebowlstadium.com. They can go there for everything from tours to upcoming events to the community events and community influence that we have. And then the Rose Bowl Legacy Foundation is at inspire2022.org. We turn 100 years young in 2022, so we're doing an inspirational fundraising campaign right now. And they can do everything from watching great videos with celebrities like Peyton Manning and Kenny Chesney, who we talked about, to reliving moments. We have a fan who was, he's been to 76 straight Rose Bowl games, and we did a piece on him, and it was just, it's unbelievable the emotion that is underlying with all these people that are involved in our Rose Bowl family. So inspire2022.org is the foundation website, and rosebowlstadium.com is our stadium website. And we're excited to see you guys back in Pasadena as soon as you're allowed.
Absolutely. Hey, Dean, thanks for coming on to Beyond. Appreciate it.
You got it, Ben. Thank you. Have a great afternoon and a great week and a great month.